Race in the modern era has seen the circulation of the violent black man stereotype that has been promoted through his criminalization in the war on drugs, his overrepresentation in mass incarceration, and the deprivation of his life in extrajudicial shootings. Too often, the recurrent theme and justification is that the black man poses a threat. So, criminalization, imprisonment, and death are offered as modern prevention strategies. How did we get here? Rather than try to tell a sociological story, let us examine one instance of this racial myth-making in a widely studied, influential literary forebear, Shakespeare's Hamlet. Hamlet introduces the loaded word more when he contrasts his murderous uncle Claudius to his deceased father, whom Hamlet mourns. Showing his mother two pictures, Hamlet asks scornfully, "Could you on this fair mountain leave to feed and batten on this moor?" While the word moor can refer to landscape, it is also the most used early modern term for a person of African origin. And Hamlet artfully contrasts Claudius, this moor, to the fair mountain that was his father. The black and white pairing underscoring the central moral and plot tension in racial terms. Importantly, when Hamlet speaks of Claudius as a Moor, the association is meant to indict his uncle for murder. In so doing, Hamlet confirms the popular racial bias evident in many early modern plays that he has internalized about black men as agents of wicked, violent acts. In this moment, Hamlet's moral disdain for Claudius takes a pivotal turn that redefines their history of animosity in terms of racial outrage. We can now fully grasp Hamlet's dilemma. Early in the play, Hamlet's father's ghost reveals Claudius's duplicity in masterminding the royal assassination, with the added demand that Hamlet take revenge and, in turn, kill Claudius. Hamlet is left in doubt, wondering whether he should trust the ghost or fear it as a malign spirit. However, if, as we have seen, Hamlet associates murder with blackness, he's now quite desperate, knowing that obeying the ghost might make him the very thing he despises. An unjust killer, or, in his own mind, a homicidal Moor, a murderous black man. Hamlet's famous delay, therefore, is not simply a philosophical or moral matter. It is rooted in Hamlet's conscious participation in a racial ideology that threatens to reposition him on one side of the black-white divide. Now, we shouldn't take Hamlet's whiteness for granted. In fact, Hamlet calls attention to his delay in avenging his father's murder by criticizing himself as a coward, only to colorize cowardice as white, pale, and sickly. In his famous To Be or Not to Be soliloquy, Hamlet confesses, "Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue and resolution is sicklied over with the pale cast of thought." Cowardice diminishes. It saps mental resilience and drains the hue or color from a healthy body, making it appear anemic, feeble, and pallidly white. For a prince known for his long reflective monologues, Hamlet's self-indictment suggests that his criticism extends across the play to identify a perceived weakness racialized as white. This sickly cowardice can only be corrected by its opposite, a form of blackness as action that deepens the conundrum he faces. As a result, we can better understand the significance of Hamlet's request to the troupe of traveling actors, for it intersects with the racial dilemma of his own non-action. Hamlet requests a performance featuring an avenging, bloodthirsty Pyrrhus arriving in Troy to murder King Priam as retaliation for the slaughter of his father, Achilles. Hamlet is clearly drawn to the avenging son narrative, but the racial significance of this affinity has been too long overlooked. Shakespeare pointedly paints Pyrrhus as black in striking contrast to the classical literary tradition to which the warrior son belongs. To reinforce his identification with Pyrrhus, Hamlet recites the lines describing the combatants hidden in the Trojan horse, among them the rugged Pyrrhus. He whose sable arms, black as his purpose, did the night resemble. And as if to forestall the skepticism of modern critics, Shakespeare expands the description using the word complexion to complement sable arms in order to foreground Pyrrhus's physical body that, quote, hath now this dread and black complexion smeared with heraldry more dismal. Hamlet, we discover, has been a fan of this acting company, and the specific request for a little-known scene from their repertory explains his attempt to come to terms with being a man of violent action that, in his mind, is equivalent of becoming black. Hamlet is an early modern example of the deeply troubling conflation of blackness and violence that has all too easily assumed currency in the modern era. In the late 19th century, the fiction of the docile plantation slave living in happy servitude gave way to the myth of the violent black predator as a reaction to black emancipation, whose criminalization would justify imprisonment and, over time, result in today's mass incarceration. The consequences of the violent black man myth for the health and life of racialized black persons are dire, as we become instant targets to be neutralized before we threaten. However, the closing scene of Hamlet, with its cast of dead bodies strewn across the stage, undercuts the racial disinformation that drives Hamlet's behavior. Black persons in the drama did not commit this wretched slaughter. White men did. Shakespeare critiques the fact and tragedy of white violence that, as we have seen with Hamlet, would prefer to use blackness as political cover and mask.